This morning, I'm going to be talking about degenerative diseases the next 2 days. Tomorrow as well. I'm going to do part 1 today and part 2 tomorrow. By the time you go through this, we go through it together, we're going to know more about cancer than many physicians do. And what we're going to look at is the cause, because if we can look at the cause and if we applies to our life, then we can make changes in our life and prevent this terrible disease from coming about to ourselves and our family. So today, I thought I would give you a solution to start with, one solution, because it might get a little boring in a way, because I'm going to give you facts of how cancer comes about. But first, I wanted to give you my background a little bit in cancer. I did this before a few years ago, but basically, most of my adult life, I've worked in health-related programs, primarily in health maintenance organizations. In the early 1980s, I worked for Loma Linda University as the claims manager. From there, I got a call to the General Conference, and I worked as my title was that I was in charge of the North American Division's health benefits for all the conferences that were under the General Conference. Some of them had their own programs. It was separate. So I was Director of Employee Benefit Services was my title. I traveled from conference to conference every single week. On Sunday afternoon, I was on an airplane, and I came back on Thursday. I got so tired of not being with my children that I took a calling later on to Loma Linda University Medical Center and worked as a marketing director for a health maintenance organization. During this period of time, and there's a reason I'm telling you this, is because I did a lot of demographic studies, and I found that the Adventist people were just like the rest of the population. They were getting sicker every year. The cost of health care, when I started way back in the 1970s, a person under age 30 years old could get full coverage with maybe a $100 deductible for less than $20 a month. That same coverage would be worth almost $300 a month for most companies, and even more expensive than that under the Affordable Health Care Act. So you can see things have changed. Not only has costs gone up, but people are becoming sicker and sicker and sicker. And we as a people should not be in that category. So we're going to look at that today. But I wanted to get into some testimonies that I have written down on people. One of them is sitting in this audience, and he's looking a little nervous at the moment, but I won't ask you to come up. And this is dealing with product B. I come here, I don't like to talk about products particularly, but this one has proven itself, and it's something people need to know. Because the way it works is this, that on every cell of your body, you have what's called a chromosome, and on top of the chromosome is called a telomere. How many have heard of telomeres? Oh, a lot of people today. It's becoming more and more common. 5 years ago, no one would probably raise their hand, but maybe 2 or 3 in the whole audience. Well, in the telomere is your DNA information. And that DNA information will tell a brain cell to operate as a brain cell, a kidney cell to operate as a kidney cell, and so on. But as we age, the telomeres become shorter. And scientists have determined this is what causes aging in the human body. But what we have found, not only does it help longevity, but it also helps to restore organs that are diseased. That is the good news. And so as the telomeres are repaired, and there's a medical doctor, I don't recall her name, but I think up in Northern California, who tests all of her patients that are going on product B as to the length of their telomeres, and a few months later she retests them, and 100% of the cases they've all gotten longer. That repairs DNA information. The genetic information is repaired. But what if the organ is damaged? Well, keep in mind that the organ is made up of what? Cells. So every one of those cells in that organ has a telomere, and as it is rebuilding, it helps to repair. You all, last time I was here, saw the picture of this gentleman who was dying. He was put into induced coma because he'd had major heart attacks. That, in fact, neighbors of his put him on the product B, and within just a few months, he was back working again. He's fine today. I heard another video by him just a few weeks ago, and his heart has basically repaired itself. And so this is the way I believe that it can work with cancer. I want to give a disclaimer. I'm not making a statement that this will heal anything. I have to because we're on live television right now around the world, and we can't make those kind of claims. But we can give testimonies, and that's what I want to do right now. There's a man that I know of who had multiple myeloma, means he's had cancer in various places of his body, and he had taken chemotherapy, radiation therapy. I'm not clear whether he had surgery. He may have had that too. But what happened was his doctor said, we've done everything we can. Well, I advise you to go on hospice, go home, get your affairs in order, and we'll keep you comfortable until you pass away. But he started taking the product B, and this is the phenomenal thing. It doesn't work this fast in everyone, but in his case it did. By about 14 days of taking it, actually his tumors started to reduce. And by the time that his testimony came along, they were almost gone. There was another man that we've worked with, and I don't think I told this story last time. I was working with him at the time that we had Tabernacles last fall. But he came to our program, and we did our normal cleansing program with him, got him on a good lifestyle program. He was an Adventist, but we had gone from cause to effect, and he had been a custodian in a school for over 26 years. And during that period of time, he worked around toxic materials, cleaning materials, and constantly. And I've had a lot of custodians that have come through our program over the years, and most of them had cancer because of the chemicals. In the early days, they didn't protect themselves. They didn't wear gloves. They didn't wear any kind of respirator to keep the fumes down from going into their system. Well, before he came to interview me and our facility to see if they wanted to come. I get that a lot. And so about 2 weeks before our program, he and his wife came out, and he was in such tremendous pain that he sat down in the chair, and there he sat the whole interview. I wanted to show them around the facility. I showed his wife, but not him. So, long story short, he had liver cancer that had metastasized into the lining of his lungs. He was in extreme pain, but he refused to take pain medication, which was to his credit, actually. So as a result, when it was time to go home, I had to help him out of the chair because he could not pull himself out because the pain was so great. Got him to his car. They came 2 weeks later, and within the 1 week that he stayed with us, the 8 days that he was there, the pain was totally gone. We put him on product B, and he hid outside in the bushes when his kids came to pick him up in a van. Remember, he couldn't even move before. His wife said all he did is sit in front of a TV set all day long. So he hid in the bushes, and as soon as he saw the car approaching, we have 15 acres, so we have a long driveway, he ran down the driveway to meet his kids. They all had tears in their eye. And so we know this is a good program, but there's more to it than that. Lifestyle, cleansing, which we're going to get into tomorrow more than today. So let me just get into this one more. I almost forgot. One more, and that's Rodney right here. And Rodney has been staying at the ranch. He and Eileen will be going back to the ranch sometime probably next week. And when he came, he has thyroid cancer. And I asked permission to talk about him. I asked him, and he gave it. So I'm not saying something out of school here. And he had a visible tumor here on his throat. Now, we've done more than the product B, but he's been taking product B and following the hydrotherapy that we do at the ranch. He's still doing it here. And the hydrotherapy will help to kill the cancer cells. And, of course, diet and a whole lifestyle. Of course, he had a pretty good lifestyle before. But the fact is that it's working for him. He'll be glad to show you. It's just a little tiny bit that's left of that tumor today. And we've been working on it for about a month. So God is good, and he has his methods. And I think things like this may have come to our attention in these last days because so many people are sick. And it works on just about everything other than than cancer itself. I shouldn't say plain. There's nothing plain about it. All right. Well, I wanted to do a little Bible study just real quickly before we get into cancer. And the first one I want to take you, the first Bible reference would be in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And we're going to look at 2 verses. And this is something you're very familiar with. I've read this here before in past years, but I think it's good to renew our memories and to be able to think on what God has for us. It says in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16, "Know we not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you?" You all know that, don't you? You're the temple of God. But what happens if we do not take care of this temple? Pardon me. What happens? The next verse tells us if we eat wrong, and we know it if we're eating wrong. It's not out of ignorance if we just go ahead and eat stuff that is health-defying to our system. Then verse 17 says, "If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are." So we don't want God to destroy it. I don't think he destroys it by zapping us. I believe he allows nature to take its course, and one of the ways is cancer. Now, there's some people that have cancer that we cannot account for. Why? Why do they have cancer? I talked about one night before last. And that was a lady, that was an Adventist lady who kept all 8 of the laws of health. Some of you might remember I talked about her, and she had cancer. Why? Well, we found out the answer to that from going to cause to effect. She had had a hysterectomy some 25 years later, and she'd been on a drug, Premarin, for all those years. They didn't have hormone replacement therapy at the time in which she went through it. But we don't use it either. We use God's natural ways. So we got her off of the drug that she was taking. I'm hesitant to mention it too much on this, and gave her natural foods to eat. And within 18, 19 months, the Lord totally healed her. It took a little longer. We didn't have product B and other things in those days. But she was totally healed of cancer. Praise God. So we are the temple of the living God. Now, other place, there's a couple of other scriptures I'd like to take you to. This one would be in Revelation chapter 14, the 3 angels' message real quick. And I'm only going to read the first angel, Revelation 14, 6 and 7. "And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God and give" what? Glory to him. I'm going to stop right there. Glory. If we're to give glory to God, we need to know what that glory is. Would you agree with me? And so this is what we want to look at real quickly. What is the glory of God? Now, we all have ideas on what it is. And I was not surprised when I found it in the Bible what it is, but and I think probably many of you have the right idea. So let's find out what that glory is. The first place to go to is John chapter 17. John 17. And we're going to look at verse 21 through 23. This is the Lord himself speaking. He says, and this is the prayer that he sent up for us, that they may be one as thou, Father, art in me. I can hardly see the red edition with my eyes. And let me start over. That they all may be one as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me, and the glory which thou givest me, I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one. So the glory is given to us. But unless we know what that glory is, it's not doing us a world of good. We need to know. And it goes on in verse 23, I in them and thou in me, that they may be made perfect in one, and that the world may know that thou hast sent me, and hast loved them as thou hast loved me. So now, one thing I would just want to point out with that is that when we have a scripture of this nature, we need to help fulfill the Lord's Prayer. In other words, he's not going to force us to have the glory of God. We have to receive it. So we have to do our part. Well, let's go to the next area, and let's take a look and find out exactly what this is all about. So let's go over to the Exodus chapter 33. Exodus chapter 33. This is going to give us the answer to the question, what is the glory? You remember the story that Moses was up on the mountain and he asked to be able to see the Lord. And the Lord said, I will do this for you because I know you by name, but I will not show you the front of me because you would die. I will show my back parts. So Moses was put into between two rocks, and the Lord's passed by. And this is what it says in verse 18. And he said, I beseech thee, show me thy glory. And he said, I will make all my goodness pass before thee. It's his goodness, his righteousness, his character, his being. That is the glory. Now, he's given that to us, but we need to receive that into our lives, as I've already stated, and we need to take it. And that includes the health message as well. We need to take care of the temple body because the glory of the Lord can reside in our temple body. Now, somebody might ask if me, and I've been asked this before, as to what happens if, in fact, I am sick already. What if I already have cancer? What if I have this? You can be in a wheelchair and reflect the glory of God. Amen. It doesn't matter. What we decide today, we can go forward and the God will accept that and bless it. So I'm not trying to make somebody feel bad because they may be ill. But we do from this day forward what the Lord wants us to do. Also, does the Lord give us good things? I believe that the Lord is going to provide for us in this time of trouble coming. So many people are afraid of the time of trouble because they're afraid, what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? Where am I going to live? Does it really matter if the Lord has promised that our food and water would be sure? It doesn't matter, does it? We may have some hungry days, but I don't believe we'll starve to death. You know, there may be some people that need to go to the grave for their salvation. But the fact is, God is going to be there for us. I want to take you over to two more scriptures. The next one is in the book of Numbers chapter 11. Numbers chapter 11. Now, when the children of Israel went into the wilderness, God provided for them, didn't he? He gave them water, and when the water was bitter, he would sweeten it. He gave them just about everything they needed, including food. Now, let me just ask a question. If you, in the time of trouble, and God said, I will give you manna from heaven, and manna falls from heaven, or it's delivered by a raven, or in some way we end up with manna, would you be happy with that? Thank you. I like the hopefully, because you absolutely know where I'm going with this. So hopefully is right. We want to appreciate what God does for us. But we find in the 11th chapter of Numbers that the children of Israel didn't appreciate it. And so the reason I say this is that food is one of the major causes today of all diseases. It is probably number one. And when we're talking about degeneration or cancer, it is the number one cause. Remember, God will allow what we're doing to kill us if that's what we want. We can kill ourselves with our spoon and fork. So with that in mind, verse 4. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? Wow. Isn't that a slap in the face to the Lord? What happens if you invited somebody to your home and you prepared hours, a nice vegetarian meal, and they came in and said, Where's the meat? Yuck. How would you feel? You wouldn't feel good. That's for sure. Verse 5, we remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes. Wow. Put yourself in the Lord's place. How would you feel? And so, with that in mind, Moses also started complaining. Not about the food. He started complaining about the people because he had the pressure on him. The pressure was on. We want flesh. We want flesh. And verse 10, Then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the angel of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased. And Moses said unto the Lord, Wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant? And wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all these people upon me? Have I conceived all these people? Have I begotten them, that thou shouldest say unto me, Carry them in thy bosom as a nursing father, bearing the suckling child unto the land which thou hast swearest unto their fathers? Whence should I have flesh to give all these people? For they weep unto me, saying, Give us flesh, that we may eat. Now, do we feel that way? You know, we talked about, night before last, we talked about how bad meat has become, and how the USDA and the FDA are joining forces to make it mandatory that all meat be cooked before you buy it. Some of you weren't here probably, but that's what they're trying to do. And they said it could be as early as next year. What they're allowing is the meat industry to gear up for this. So if you want to go in and buy a chicken, it'll be cooked. And at some point, because of the new regulations that are coming down, because they have found that many thousands of people die each year of airborne type of bacteria, viruses that are in the food, particularly in meats. And the meats are contaminated with fecal matter, urine, and that's what you're eating. So they're going to try to help keep people healthy. Can you believe that? I'm sorry, I'm a little facetious when it comes to those agencies. Well, we can also go on further. It says that, Wherefore should I feed these people? Moses said, I am not able to bear all this people, this Moses speaking now, alone, because it is too heavy for me. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me. He'd rather die than have to go through what he's going through. Have you ever felt that way? I know I have. At times when the burdens and the trials get so heavy, sometimes you feel like I'd rather go to sleep. And I pray thee, out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness. Well, you know what a great man Moses was, but he's like us. He's human, and he had feelings. And this was got to be so much of a burden to him that he would like to just go to sleep. Well, it didn't end there, the story. Go down to verse 18, and it says, "And say unto the people, Sanctify yourself against tomorrow, and ye shall eat flesh. For ye have wept in the ears of the Lord, saying, Who shall give us flesh to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt." Wow, see, they want to go back to slavery. Why? Because of their appetite, because they want to eat flesh. How many of us in here are slave to our appetite? Probably many. And this is what we need to work on. If we want to have health and we want to have a healthy temple body, we need to get into the right dietary frame of mind. Verse 19, "And ye shall not eat 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20 days, but even a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils." He's going to cram it down their throats. And sometimes that's what it takes, doesn't it? For us to wake up. "And it be loathsome unto you, because that ye have despised the Lord which is among you, and have wept before him, saying, Why came we out of Egypt?" Wow. Are we saying the same thing? We may not be saying it verbally or even mentally. But God has given us, at least at this point in this country, plenty of fruits and vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds that we can eat. Everything, Susan, you're right. So anyway, everything. And so, but the fact is, we still run down to McDonald's, don't we? Burger King. Carl Jr.'s. All right, I like that. Okay. Well, let's look and see what happened to the people. You already remember what it is. And on verse 31, "And there went forth a wind from the Lord, and brought quail from the sea, and let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, and as it were a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp, and as they were 2 cubits high upon the face of the earth. And the people," that's a lot of quail, "and the people stood up all that day, and all that night, and all the next day, and they gathered the quail. He that gathereth the least amount was 10 omers." Now 10 omers, I looked it up, is 100 bushels. Can you imagine 100 bushels of quail? That is a lot of quail. "He that gathereth the least," anyway, "and they spread them all about for themselves and around the camp." Now here comes the judgment. Verse 33, "And while the flesh was between their teeth, ere it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague." Many died as a result. Many died today as a result of their diets. In fact, the majority. The statistics are over 500,000 people in America die each year because of diet. And then that's not even including cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. So it's a major problem in which we're facing. Well, let's take a look at cancer and what we can do to be able to prevent it from happening. Well, first of all, in your body, physiologically, you have trillions of cells. And in these cells, you find that there's components. One would be a mitochondria. I'm not going to get into all of the components of a cell, but just a couple. And the mitochondria is responsible for your energy. It is called the powerhouse of the cell, and you probably know this already, but it produces ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And adenosine triphosphate is what helps to give you energy. But I can almost rest assured that what I'm about to say is true, that 90% of you do not have the energy that you would like to have. And so there's reasons for it. And as we go through degeneration, this would apply to our energy level. So these trillions of cells, and we've already talked about the telomere, but the telomere is critical because if there's damaged DNA, it can cause other damage in the body, including tumors. And I won't get ahead of myself. So healthy body, the cells divide and at a controlled rate. So as they reproduce themselves, it's at a controlled rate. That's the way it should be. Some cells will last a few weeks, like the blood cell, for an example. It'll last 120 days. The blood cells you have, even if they were produced today, excuse me, will be totally changed within 4 months. And I look at blood every week, and when I see blood, I see a lot of things that I'm going to talk about today that can add to cancer itself. So what does a healthy cell do? They grow, they repair damaged tissue, they replace dying cells. That's what they do. But if they're damaged, if the DNA is damaged, the cell grows uncontrollably. It can. That's what cancer is, or a tumor could be that as well. It forms growths or tumors, and a benign tumor is not cancer, you know that already, but generally is not threatening. A benign tumor is not as threatening. It can appear in the body, almost anywhere in the body, it can be there. And some people have these fatty tumors that come in their neck, come in their back, come in their arm. They're unsightly, at least to them. They'd like to get rid of them, but yet they're not life-threatening. Fibroids, to a big extent, are not life-threatening either, but there's something that you don't want that you'd like to get rid of them. These benign tumors, once they're removed, rarely come back. But it's a little different with a malignancy. How many people have we heard where a malignancy's been removed and it came back? Many, many people. So malignant tumors are cancers we talked about, and the tumors will grow uncontrollably. And it could be a slow-growing tumor. Some of them are very slow-growing. Many times when people are looking to see if they might have cancer in their body, they find a tumor that may be just small that had been there for years. But there's other types that are fast-growing. I'll give you an example. I had a man that came to my program with prostate cancer. He was 65 years old, and it was one of the aggressive types. He was given probably 18 months to 2 years to live, that it would overtake him and kill him. So we put him through God's methods and gave him the strictest diet that you can think of. He stayed on it, and we lost contact with him, and about a year later he called back. He was excited, and he said, "My PSA is normal. The cancer's gone." Not only that, he said, "My aches and pains and my blood pressure is normal again. I don't have to take medication anymore." He says, I feel really good today. He said, "I'm going to stay on the program." And that was a few years ago, and here he is now about 80 years old, and I think it was 2 years ago, he just showed up one day at the ranch, and he didn't look a day older, I should say. A wrong way to go here. Well, that's my dyslexic mind. So anyway, he did not look older at all. And he said, "It's payback time. I came to help you." I said, "You're 80-some years old, you want to help?" "Yes." So anyway, he's still alive, and he's getting older every day, but he's still very active, feels good, but he stays on the program. One of the things about cancer is you have to stay on a program for your whole life. It's something you cannot do otherwise. If you go off of it, I had a lady, as an example of this, this particular lady had liver cancer, and it was stage 4. She was in a great deal of pain but refused to take medication, and we get that once in a while. And so she was cleansed as we normally do and put her on a program. And we used hydrotherapy as we did with Rodney. He can tell you more about it. And tomorrow I'll get into that, how it works. But we applied it, and the tumors within about 2 weeks, you could no longer see them. They were protruding up through the skin on the liver, and they started disappearing. She started feeling better, and after a few months, she said, "Oh, I'm really doing great on this." And what did she do? She went off the diet. She started eating cake and ice cream. The cancer came back on her with a vengeance, and she died. She could have lived. I believe it was quite possible for her to live. But you have to stay on a program. There's a lot of good programs. My program isn't the only one. And I'm going to get into tomorrow some alternatives that you can look at. But first of all, we need to know what causes it. Malignant tumors, they also have the ability to metastasize or to go to any parts of the body. Now, where do they go? How do they spread? They can spread through the blood system, cardiovascular system. They can get into that. It's one of their favorite ways. Another way is through the lymphatic system, which you have about 25,000 miles of lymphatic vessels through your body, and they can travel just about anywhere in the body through that. They can also travel through the cerebral spinal fluid. The spinal fluid goes from the brain all the way down to the middle part of your body, and it can flow in there. Those are areas that it likes to go into. But what they have found, and tomorrow you're going to get the latest science on what causes cancer. I want to get into it in more detail, which I don't have time today. But the fact is, I'm going to skip over some of these notes and get into more of what causes it. And you're going to find that what causes cancer oftentimes is damaged DNA. Damaged DNA. 5 years ago, the average person in North America, which would include Canada and Mexico as well, had 500 cancer cells developed in their body every single day. But your immune system, working properly, was able to keep them under control. There's a process called apoptosis. Apoptosis is cell death, and your immune system will cause these muted cells to die. What happened within 5 years? That was 5 years ago. What's it like today in 2014? Over 1,000 cells on an average, cancer cells or muted cells, are developed in our bodies today. Why the changes? Because of several reasons. One, diet. We may have a good diet, but if there's no nutrition in the food, we're not getting the raw materials in which our body needs, are we? Number two, the extreme increase in toxicity. There's so many toxins being dumped into our world today, and lifestyle. People are not following the laws of health. The world obviously isn't, and many of God's people aren't either. So cells can grow out of control. All cancer cells can actually metastasize where most other tumors do not. So we need to get treatment going on cancer as soon as we possibly can. What causes cancer? Okay, let's get into that in the few minutes that we have left. I look at the clock and I keep speeding along, and I'm not giving you the detail that I'd like to give you. It can come from a combination of different factors or even one factor. Let's look at skin cancer for a moment. What causes skin cancer? And I've talked about it the other night, but just real briefly, it's the high fat content in the blood that's underneath the skin and the tiny capillary beds, with a chemical reaction taking place with the sun. And we end up with basal cell carcinoma, sarcoma, or possibly melanoma. And pardon me? It's on my notes. You're way ahead of me, but that's tomorrow. But you're so right. Margarine is part of it. There's no question about that. You're right on, 100%. So anyway, the factors that we find are different in many cases, and we need to look at how it starts. Let's get into a few of them. Genetic disposition. What's that mean? It means that your family has a history of cancer. That does not mean that you will necessarily get cancer. If you do the right things, you can prevent it. But yet that is one way. Another one is behavioral. Why would I say behavioral? Well, if you are an angry person and you actually have what we call toxic emotions, and these toxic emotions can cause physiological changes to take place. And when these physiologic changes take place, it can actually mutate cells that can form cancer. And then these toxic emotions can go back to pain and suffering that we've had as children all the way through our lifetime. I've had many people come through our program that the biggest challenge we had to do was to help them with the pain emotionally in which they had. And I would suspect that half or more of the people in this room today have emotional pain of some kind. That emotional pain could be constant or it could be something that happened years ago that's never been dealt with. And when it comes to things like anger, resentment, bitterness, and so on, we need to do what? We need to forgive. Forgive. Remember, healing comes from obedience. And God says that we are to forgive, and we should do that. Would you agree? All right. So the next thing is environmental toxins. And I brought some notes. I have an old notebook that's fallen apart. I have several of them like this. And I thought I would just briefly mention the environmental toxins that is actually hurting us. One would be mercury. And what it does, it affects the brain, the endocrine system, and other parts of the brain itself. So a lot of neurological problems can come about from mercury. It also brings about Parkinson, neuropathy, Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's disease, dementia, and cancer. And the various cancers can come about because of poisoning. Lead poisoning, I won't go through all of these because I have a whole notebook full of them, can actually accumulate in the brain, the liver, the bones, the kidneys, the spleen, and it can alter behavior and intelligence. If you have 30 milligrams or more of lead in your brain, it can actually lower your IQ by 10 points. So it's something that you need to do is detoxify. One more and then I'll quit. Aluminum. Aluminum is everywhere. It's estimated that the average person takes in their lifetime internally 3 pounds of aluminum. Food is wrapped in it. We get it from all angles. And what it can cause, again, is Alzheimer's, memory loss, dementia. It can cause convulsions, anemia. It can also cause eating problems and eating disorders in some. That people take so much of it that it would equal 292 squares of aluminum foil. 3 pounds. Now, I'll stop on that. I noticed the clock went too fast and we're at the point of having to quit. But we'll get into more causes tomorrow, but we're going to get into the solutions too. So the causes, what I'll give you a little hint as the clock totally winds down. What they have found, this is new science, that is chronic inflammation in the body. If you have chronic inflammation such as arthritis or other types of inflammatory diseases, the chances of cancer forming is great. That's what they've found. That's recent science. And we'll get into how that works tomorrow. Anyway, my time is totally up. Let's have prayer. Go ahead and have prayer. All right. Let's bow our heads. Gracious Father, we thank you so much for the health message, and we thank you that we can actually prevent cancer in our system and our bodies by just following and knowing what causes it. Bless each person here today. And it goes further than cancer, dear Lord. It goes to all degeneration. Cancer is just a name. Other diseases are come from the same cause. They just manifest themselves differently. So bless this group and bless us in Jesus' name. Amen.